Amber Amphitheater. We are visiting the ruins of an ancient Greek amphitheater set high on a cliff above the sea, where the last light of the day pools in the stone like warm honey. The only other visitors are a small family, two children playing near a wind-shaped tree, and their parents seated together, arms around each other, watching the sun drift toward the water. The path to the theatre curls through scrub that smells of thyme and warm dust, and the air carries a faint salt that gathers on your lips as you walk. The stones underfoot are pale and smooth where countless feet once passed, and rough at the edges where time has had its quiet say. When you step into the open of the orchestra, the sky feels wider, a rounded slice of evening balanced above the sea. Terraced seats rise in long, patient arcs, each row cut from rock, each row receiving the day's last touch of gold. Seabirds describe loose circles beyond the cliff, their wings catching light like small signals. Somewhere far below, the surf unrolls and recoils with an unhurried rhythm that meets the ear with simple certainty. The wind moves in soft bands, cool and then warm, like water layered in a tide pool. A grasshopper clicks and lands on a cushion of wild herbs between two stones, and then the theatre is still again. You stand in the center and look up, and the sky seems to listen back. When you test a whisper, the amphitheater answers with an honest echo that brushes the stones and returns to you softened. The old geometry holds true, a bowl designed for voices and silence both, and even the hush feels carefully placed. You imagine a chorus once arranged along the curve, sandals dusting the ground, palms open to the sea wind. Masks painted with broad expressions might have watched the horizon the way you do now, waiting for the light to tilt. The seats, worn smooth by audiences long gone, show a polish where hands once rested, where laughter and lament both found purchase. Between the blocks a braid of grass has threaded its bright green through grey, a gentle seam that binds eras. Above the highest row, swallows stitch quick arcs, changing direction as if tugged by an invisible sleeve. The orchestra floor, ringed by herbs and shards of patterned pottery, holds the sun like a shallow basin. And beyond, the water tenses and relaxes and tenses again, keeping time with nothing and everything. The family appears as a small vignette within the grand curve, a contained story placed inside a larger one. The children have found a tree that grows from a crack in the stone, bent by wind until its trunk leans like a bow. They are playing a game that requires running around the trunk, tapping a knot with 2 fingers, and giggling at a rule only they understand. Their sandals skitter across pebbles, then hush on dust, then tick on stone, each surface composing a different note. A ribbon has snagged on a twig and flutters, a bright scrap in the evening air. The parents sit a few rows up, their shoulders meeting, one hand threaded through the other's elbow in a quiet loop. They watch the horizon as if it were a story being told slowly and well, and their stillness has its own music. When the children call, the mother lifts a hand and waves without looking away from the sea, and the father leans his head, smiling into her hair. The theatre seems to fold around them, a gentle crescent, as though the stone recognizes tenderness and makes room. The sun lowers and smooths itself along the water until it resembles a coin pressed into blue wax. Light climbs the steps like a careful traveller, touching one seat after another before it moves on. Between breaths of wind, you can hear a bee roam the small yellow flowers at the edge of the stage. The sea answers in syllables that repeat without tiring, the vowels drawn out long and even. A faint path along the cliff shows where goats sometimes come, their hooves leaving dashes in the dust like notes on a staff. Offshore, a fishing boat slides toward a cove, the net hung like a curtain waiting to fall. The theatre holds to its rim of sky, and each stone becomes its own small sunset, warm on the top, cool in the seam. A cloud drifts thin as silk and takes a pink you could almost name if you had more time. As the light leans, shadows lengthen between the rows, stitching the tears with slow thread. Everything in sight agrees upon the hour without saying it. The tree that anchors the children's attention has bark like scaled bronze, rough where years have asked for patience. One branch grows parallel to the ground before turning upward, a modest stage railing for small hands to slide along. Ants travel its bark in unwavering lines, carrying secrets that matter only to them and entirely. The children collect small flat stones and arrange them in rings around the trunk, declaring boundaries with seriousness and joy. When the wind lifts, the leaves flick, showing silver undersides, and sunlight rattles through them like a bright whisper. A bird hops along the higher branch and watches the game with a tilted head, as if the rules might be explained. The older child ties a thin stalk of grass into a loop and crowns the younger, who stands solemn and then bursts into laughter that climbs the seats like a quick melody. The tree holds the sound and lets it go, and the amphitheater says nothing, which is also a form of blessing. The game resets with the gravity of a rite, and the leaf shadows keep time on the stones. Above them, the parents lean closer, their outline a single curve against the ambering sky. The mother's shawl lifts at the edges and settles again, a small sail finding its wind. The father traces circles on her sleeve with a thumb, absent and present at once. A thermos sits by their feet, its cup inverted and glinting. Steam is long gone, but the memory of warmth lingers. They speak rarely, and when they do, their voices graze the stone and dissolve, part of the evening medium. A pause holds steady between their words, tucked and comfortable, as if saved for later. When the children call again, both turn with the same unhurried motion, like two sides of a page. Then they turn back to the water, and the horizon draws a soft line through whatever they remember and whatever waits ahead. Their hug is not an event, but a place, as dependable as the benches cut in rock. The theater, expert in gatherings, seems pleased by this small assembly of four. If you listen for it, a distant thread of history runs under the present, like cool water beneath warm sand. Perhaps the chorus once entered from stage left, where time now sprawls. Voices braided and measured, palms lifted to address a sky very much like this. Stone remembers pressure and release, applause and silence, and the timp of sandals before dawn. You can almost see salt cloaks and olive wreaths, the quick exchanges of glance and breath before a line. The grooves cut into the highest steps are paths for ideas as much as feet, and they travel easily from then to now. Laughter once sat here and made itself at home, and grief once climbed the same rows and found a place to rest. The mask of comedy and the mask of tragedy still trade their quiet shapes in the shifting light. Now they soften, both of them, and watch the family, as if recognizing an ending that requires no chorus. The sea receives these ghosts without ceremony, and returns only a patient hush. In this way, histories become weather. At the cliff's lip, where the world falls into blue, the light opens and spreads into a glazed path that seems passable to anyone willing to walk the water. The amphitheater frames this path, a lens made of limestone and air. A gull rides an invisible current, and barely spends itself to move, wingtips ticking like metronomes. Far below, water claws at the rock with cotton-lipped fingers that leave no mark, and every mark. A cove holds a pocket of foam where a tide, mischief-minded, keeps spinning the same small circle. The sun tests the edge of the horizon and leaves a trail of polished copper that deepens with every inch. A bell from the boat peals once, hollow and sure, then ceases, as if it were simply checking that sound still carries. The theatre allows this distant note to rest briefly within its curve, then lets it go, unpinned. Air cools a fraction, as noticeable as the removal of a thin ring. The day loosens its grasp, finger by finger. Scents arrive in a patient procession and make their introductions with courtesy. Time first, then rock warmed all afternoon, and now breathing its heat out slowly. A thread of pine, resin bright and almost sweet, drifts down from the ridgeline beyond the last row. The sea contributes its mineral calm, a taste as much as a smell, and brings to mind shells worn smooth by years. Dust rises where a toe scuffs and settles again without complaint, wrapping the moment in a soft veil. Somewhere in a crease of the seats a lizard appears, pauses to feel the last stripe of sun, and slides back to a private scene. Closer to the orchestra, a cat with island poise steps from shadow to shadow and chooses a warm stone to fold upon. The children notice and whisper to each other, as if not to disturb a guest of honor, and the cat closes its eyes in perfect agreement. These small presences round the theatre's empty spaces, so they feel full but unbusy. The amphitheater, old master of assemblies, approves the arrangement and keeps the air kindly. Colour works through its evening practice with such order that you barely perceive the transitions. Gold surrenders to apricot, apricot thins to peach, and peach cools toward rose that goes tender along the edges. The sea mimics and modifies, keeping the blue underneath like a steady breath. The seats cast longer bars of shadow that climb and drape themselves over successive rows, like shawls laid out for night. A swallow skims the orchestra in a single clean arc and vanishes behind the topmost stone, as if it had slipped through a seam in the scene. The sun, now a burnished coin, presses into the line of the world and wavers as though the water was soft glass. The children place their last ring of stones around the tree and step back with satisfaction, as if a story has reached its natural pause. The parents hold each other, and the theatre seems to tilt a fraction toward them, aligning sightlines to frame what matters. A hush takes on texture, no longer empty, but woven of light and salt and breath. It is the kind of hush that never asks for applause. When the sun's rim finally pours itself beneath the horizon, the sea keeps the color a moment, then folds it, neat and sure. The first star arrives over the far cape with the punctuality of a friend you can set a table for. The theatre's curve gathers the new shade and makes of it a cool canopy, generous and exact. The children's laughter thins and softens until it sounds like running water a room away. The parents do not move for a long breath measured only by the bell on the boat, which speaks again, lower now, praised by distance. A wind carries the dry rattle of leaves and the faintest aroma of wood smoke from a house beyond the ridge. Somewhere a goat complains politely and then is satisfied. The cat stretches into a longer cat and finds a new stone warmed from beneath. The amphitheater allows darkness to enter, like a trusted actor through a familiar door. What was warm becomes quiet, and what was bright becomes simple. The family gathers their small things with care, as though packing the evening itself. A water bottle, a ribbon rescued from the tree, a flat stone adopted by a pocket as a souvenir of circles. The children whisper to the cat a goodbye, which might also be a promise to return. The father slips the thermos into a bag with a well-rehearsed motion, and the mother straightens her shawl, then rests her cheek briefly against his shoulder, in thanks for a day held well. They look once more toward the line where color was last seen, and find instead the coin silver of a rising moon just lifting from the water. Shadows now lie differently, honest and cool, and the theatre wears them with authority. The children take hands for the steps, a compromise between energy and patience. Their footsteps rise along the rows like a soft drum played with the palm. The stone keeps all these small departures without weighing itself down. You remain a few breaths longer at the orchestra's center and feel the old geometry steady you in place. The moon pulls a pale path across the water, not as loud as sunset's path, but certain, and it suits the theater as if rehearsed together. The tree creaks once, like a wooden door in a friendly house, and its leaves show the moon their quieter faces. If you close your eyes, the amphitheater is still there as a shape in the body, a bowl of air curving from heel to shoulder. The cliff holds you at a thoughtful distance from the world below, a balcony seat in a play that needs no words. Each seat you cannot see is nonetheless occupied by something tender and unnamed, and they sit well, attentive and kind. The cat changes stones again, approving of the new hour with a silent blink. Swallows trade places with bats, and the air becomes a little more secret, which is not the same as closed. The theater is not empty. It is full of agreement. When you finally turn to climb, the steps present themselves in a rhythm that asks for nothing more than the next one. Your hand grazes the familiar cool of the seats as you pass, each touch a small bow of thanks. The path beyond the highest row carries you past time and a scatter of white pebbles that gather moonlight like dew. A cicada starts and stops and starts again, reminding the hillside of its summer name. The family is a little way ahead, their shapes companionably together, their voices a thread you could follow with your eyes closed. The sea continues, unconcerned with being seen, working its long syllables against the foot of the cliff. The air is bright enough to memorize the line of the theater against the sky, a simple curve etched on the night. When you look back, the amphitheater sits in its seat of stone and time, perfectly at ease with what it was and what it is. The moon lifts the path another shade whiter, and the goat path becomes a silver seam. The hillside, the sea, the stone, and the four figures moving toward home all agree upon the evening's ending. At the edge of the site, a low wall guides the path like the last line of a stanza. Oleander breathes a faint sweet that drifts and fades, and a crate by the gate holds a few flyers that curl at the corners from daytime heat. You pause with a palm on the gate's wooden bar, and the grain under your fingers feels ancient and familiar, like a kindly elder's hand. Beyond, a track leads back toward houses with lamps behind gauzy curtains, where plates are stacked and doors are set on latches. The theater behind you continues its quiet business of holding sky and returning sound the way a good friend returns borrowed books. Out on the water, the boat's bell does not ring again, but its absence now feels like part of the composition. The cat, a coin of shadow, leaps the wall without effort and disappears into brush perfumed with night. The wind, having finished its work with leaves, rests against the cliff and waits. When you set the gate back on its hinge and step into the softer dark, the amphitheater is still a warm idea in the chest. You carry it with the care of a lantern whose light belongs equally to you and to the path. On the road down, stones crunch with a polite restraint that belongs to night in a small place. A dog answers another dog once, then the accord returns. An upstairs window shows a square of lamplight where someone rinses a glass very slowly and sets it to dry with the confidence of habit. You follow the curve that leads towards sleep and rooms and the clean yawn of linen. Over your shoulder, the cliff is now a contour against the sky, and the theater makes itself known only as a darker set of curves, like a signature in pencil. The family turns into a lane, the children's voices dropping to the pitch of secrets, the parents' steps matched. Somewhere a fig tree breathes its resin sweet into the lane like a remembered taste. The moon climbs one handspan higher and smooths the roofs as if tucking them in. The sea continues its careful handwriting at the edge of the world, line after line, page after page, and the amphitheater above keeps its generous shape for whoever might arrive tomorrow with a whisper to test and an evening to keep.